view mindfulness probably, as I do with everything else in life, differently than others. I do not see it as a meditation technique. It is that, all right? Often the word mindfulness is used for what we call witness consciousness, subjective observation, just being aware enough to watch your thoughts, watch your emotions go by, and be aware of the world in front of you. I think that it is much broader than that, and that it really is something that you could argue is the most important piece of knowledge or knowledge that you could possibly learn. So let's take an example. So how do people define mindfulness? The simplest term that it's been used in is being present, bringing consciousness to bear. Those are new agey types of concepts that we talk about. Ram Dass did what? Be here now, right? Just bring your awareness of being into the current moment and be present. It sounds good, but to me those are just words, and it doesn't really come all the way home. So I'd like to start with an example, because we're not the first people to use the word mindfulness. It has been used in the English language for a very long time. Let's say you're driving. Driving is an excellent example of how we can understand mindfulness. When you are driving, there are traffic lights, and I don't know if you noticed, but they change sometimes. And it is really important that you know that. Did you get it? All right. And also, in front of you, there are other drivers. I hope you noticed that. And they sometimes step under brakes. And these red lights come on in the back of the car. It's very important that you notice that. This is mindfulness. It's best that you be mindful when you're driving. When you go to change lanes, are you aware that even if you look in your mirrors, that there's a thing called a blind spot? You best be mindful of that. So if somebody's teaching you how to drive, they might use that word. Be mindful of all times of what's going on around you. That is mindfulness too, all right? And it is exactly what we mean by being present in the moment and bringing consciousness to bear, all right? That's kind of neat, isn't it? So you really do know about mindfulness. What happens if you're driving and you're not mindful? You crash very, very quickly. All right? Aside from the fact that there are lights, there are other cars, there are blind spots, there are these things called curves in the road. It best be that you know that. That's funny, but do you understand what I'm saying? If you don't pay attention to this, if you are not present when you are driving, it will not take 10 seconds before you crash. Do you understand that? You are not, I mean, forget about this, texting and so on, right? I'm just talking about if you're not mindful. Or sometimes I say to people, let's say you're driving and somebody cuts you off, all right? Which is really important when we start about mindfulness. It's best that you notice it, all right? Now you're being asked to interact. You're being asked to be present and be present enough to decide what to do. What are your actions? I will ask you, is the amount of mindfulness that you bring to your driving going to affect the quality of your driving? How many tickets you get, how many accidents you get in, and how well you do? Let's say you're a race car driver. Could you use the amount of mindfulness that you bring to driving for driving at Daytona at 180, 200 miles an hour with 15 cars passing you? And the answer is no, you better not. Okay? You best bring a lot more mindfulness to the presence. And what that means as a race car driver, right, is that hopefully there is nothing else going on. You're not thinking about the fight you had with the wife. You're not worrying about this or that. You had best bring your consciousness to bear in what you are doing, or you are in big trouble. All right? But it's not just in driving, because I'm going to put that aside. In that particular case, if you do not be mindful, you're in trouble. Not just as a race car driver, that's required more. So I'm going to argue that the more professional you get and the better you want to do, the more mindfulness you better bring to bear. Let's say you're an athlete. You're a golfer. You're playing baseball. Ever hear the term, keep your eye on the ball? Okay, is that not mindfulness? Is that not presence? There are professional league, I know in baseball, I don't know if it was Stan Musial or one of them, one of the great batters, used to say that when he would go to the plate, he would go into what's called the zone. Ever heard the term? That's mindfulness. That's complete mindfulness. In other words, there is nothing else going on but the pitcher, the ball, and the presence of the bat. And literally, some of them have said, and great boxers have said it too, right? That when they go in that state, everything goes into slow motion. that literally there's so much awareness that is brought to that moment that it is as though you are super conscious, right? And you can see the seams on the ball and etc. I'm not talking about an altered state of consciousness. I'm just saying you are so much more conscious that your experience of the moment has literally changed. That's mindfulness. Isn't it neat? So you do know something about it. But the main thing that I want to bring to it is whether you're talking about sports, whether you're talking about driving, right? The more consciousness you bring to bear, I like that term, right? I can use it because we're using examples. Isn't that bringing consciousness to bear in the current moment? The more consciousness you bring to bear in the current moment, the better you are at what you're doing. Anybody want to argue that? Right? Just take the extremes. Don't bring any. Okay? And by the way, as students, some of your students, all right, you might find yourself in a classroom and there might be a professor giving a lecture. I want to know whether you think it's going to affect how well you do in that class, how well you are listening to what that person is saying, or whether you are off doing something else instead of being present, like when you drive, etc. It's the exact same thing, isn't it? So it's no different than keep your eye on the ball. If you were to pay attention, I think of a story, some of you know I had a business background, and I don't want to do it big, and I've never talked about this, but I remember sitting at a table, it was a big merger that was going on, and I was sitting next to the CEO, chairman of the board, and this was multi-billion, big stuff. And on the other side was the other people, and on this side was our people, and I basically, the other side was talking, and I turned to this gentleman. He's a billionaire, regular business person, right? And I made a comment. I just said, that's interesting. And the guy turned to me just for a second. He said, stop it, I'm concentrating. And I looked at him, I didn't realize, that man, I wish I could meditate. Don't laugh. He was paying attention to every word that person was saying to make sure that he was going to get the edge. Do you understand that? To make sure he did not miss one single place that later he could do something, manipulate. I'm not saying it's good, I'm not saying it's all good stuff, all right? But basically this idea that you are going to be better at what you are doing if you're there. What do you think? Okay? All right? And that's mindfulness. Isn't that neat? That's mindfulness. It's the willingness to say, there is a task at hand. I'm not going to tell you what the task is. You say what the task is. All I'm telling you is if you learn to be mindful, and you can learn to be mindful, that's what's nice about it. I don't want people to come here and say, oh, I'm not good at that. Do you understand that? Well, I always tell everybody, when you walk into calculus class for the first time, and the teacher says, now you're in calculus, don't raise your hand and say, I'm in the wrong class. Why? I don't know anything about calculus. You're not supposed to know anything about calculus. You're supposed to learn. We have this word called learn. Right? You are the most intelligent species. I know we don't act like it, but you are the most intelligent species in the entire planet. All right? You have the ability to learn. Dogs can learn to drive cars. They can learn to do rollovers. All kinds of stuff goes on. You can learn anything you want. Do you understand that? Doesn't mean you can be the best that ever lived. You want to play the piano? Learn. You want to play tennis? Learn. Right? You want to learn to be mindful? You want to be mindful? Learn. So don't talk to me about the fact that I'm not good at that. I don't. Right? You just take it on, and what I want you to get from this discussion is, yeah, I want to do that. I'm not going to teach you how to do it. I don't teach how to do it, right? But I want to teach you to want to do it and to realize that this is not some little exercise. It's not, oh boy, I'll go meditate a little bit. It looks neat. It's a little fun. It'll quiet me down a little. No, this is your life. If you are not present, you miss your life, all right? And you are better at every single thing you do, the more consciousness you bring to bear. And there are extremes at it. For example, let's take art, music. All right? If you are truly a musician, when you are playing, you are not present. But you just said you want to be present. You are so present in that music that you lose yourself in it. You should not be there. Do you understand that? You don't even know where you went. It became, in the yoga scriptures they talk about it. It sounds so mystical. Buddhism talks about it too. When subject and object become one. You ever heard that? Right? That's the deepest state of, Patanjali talks about that in Yoga Sutras, right? When subject and object become one. That is that state in music. I wanted to bring it down to everyday life, right? Golfers talk about that. Again, the zone, where it just happened. It just flowed. I didn't do it. I was just one with it. But you know music does that, doesn't it? You can just merge in the music and you go away. And then you come back and it's like, whoa. Another thing, some of these things, aside from that discussion with the chairman, I was watching when Vladimir Horowitz was invited to go back to Russia after the fall of the Iron Curtain and everything. There was a concert he played. Many of you may have seen it. And I saw a video of it. And there was just this little old man sitting up on a stage with this giant St. Petersburg or somewhere's auditorium. The beauty of it was not what he was playing. They were panning the audience, and I'm telling you, I've never seen such a thing. Tears were uncontrollably pouring down the eyes of almost all the people in that auditorium, right? Just pouring, it's like a waterfall, just pouring off. What is that? Because he went into that state, it literally brings others into that state. That is the beauty of art. That's what that's about, right? You're touching a deeper place within yourself, right? And we're gonna talk about that. So now do you understand my idea of mindfulness? This is nice stuff, all right? And by the way, it wasn't just Vladimir playing, all right, or the musician. Ever hug someone you love? Ever melted? You got real quiet. Ever hug someone you loved and didn't? It's not so easy, is it? Not so easy to lose yourself, is it? Okay, but it's really beautiful when you do it, isn't it? Right? It's the peak experience. It's Maslow's peak experience, right? When you totally, it's self-actualization. When you lose yourself in what you're doing, that, funny as it sounds, that's the most mindful. Funny, right? It's because you're 100% of your consciousness is focused on what you're doing. There's no distractions. There's nothing pulling you anywhere else. You become one with what you're doing. Ever read a book and realize you didn't understand a single thing, you have to go back 4 pages? That's not mindfulness, right? And have you noticed that if you concentrate when you are reading, you'll remember that forever, right? There are poems you have read, there are songs you have heard, right? Why is it that after 30 years you remember the words of your high school songs that you liked? Because you were willing to be present with them. You gave so much of your awareness to them that they left indelible, deep impressions inside. You have to worry about memorizing or doing this stuff. If you are open, if you are present, if you bring consciousness to bear, you are better at every single thing you do. You understand that? Including relationships and finances and every single thing. It's not just sitting in a corner and trying to enter some higher state of consciousness. All right.